There's no doubting the relationship's important. It's still the one that could destroy the world if it went wrong. But even so, it was a coup for the Russian president to be slotted into the itinerary for Joe Biden's first foreign trip.
First of all, the meeting itself is already a positive result for Vladimir Putin because it puts him into the same league with arguably the most powerful man in the world. I think this is an important signal that Russia is not isolated, and probably it would be easier for other Western leaders to deal with the Russian president.
So positive was the Russian leader, apparently, that he didn't even keep Mr. Biden waiting, as he did with President Obama and the Pope. But could it produce anything of substance?
I'm not sitting here saying because the president and I agreed that we would do these things that all of a sudden it's going to work. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I think there's a genuine prospect to significantly improve the relations between our two countries without us giving up a single solitary thing based on principle and our values.
So had they, by a Geneva lakeside, really gained agreement to rein in cyber warfare, get back to cutting nuclear arms and restoring better diplomatic relationships? The proof of the pudding, said President Biden, would be in the eating.
I think the real deliverable of the summit was on the arms control and strategic stability front. And I think it gives them a venue to talk about not just traditional nuclear arms control, but also some of these cyber issues. And we saw President Biden in his press statement talked about setting up rules of the road. He said that there were 16 different, critical infrastructure installations that they had agreed not to target. And so it is, so that can provide a foundation, I think, for additional conversations on the cybersecurity front as well.
As for issues like human rights and the fate of Alexei Navalny, they were raised inside the talks and afterwards.
The list of your political opponents who are dead, imprisoned, or jailed is long. So my question is, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
In both places, President Putin parried references to the internal politics of his country and made comparisons between his own opposition and the Capitol Hill rioters. But he did acknowledge progress on the hard power international issues.
We understand what our American partners are talking about, and they understand what we are talking about when we say this is a red line. But I'll give it to you point blank. We haven't went so far as to define the specifics. But we have agreed to work together to continue and follow through on cybersecurity, on strategic stability.
Beyond ensuring nuclear stability and trying to limit cyber warfare, Joe Biden doesn't really have urgent demands that he wants to make of Vladimir Putin. He'd rather be rebuilding the US economy after COVID, or in foreign policy, focusing on China. Rather, this meeting mattered more to the Russian president, in part to bolster his prestige at home. President Biden, heading home now, will have to decide how far the public embrace of Putin for its security benefits justifies what's likely to be a fruitless dialogue on human rights.
I think that they don't see those two things as being in tension with one another. I mean, I think the whole kind of approach that this administration is taking to Russia is confront Putin where we must and engage where we can. And they're going to do both of those things, and they're comfortable doing both at once. I think now the onus after this summit is on President Putin.
For now, a summit launched with heavy-duty expectation management has managed to produce something worth reporting. But the questions for both leaders is whether they can abandon an adversarial relationship and, indeed, given its domestic appeal, whether they even want to.
Mark Urban with those thoughts, and joining us now, we have Nina Yankovits, a cybersecurity and disinformation specialist and a fellow at the Wilson Center. And we have Thomas Graham, a former White House advisor on Russia and a senior director for Russia on the National Security Council. Welcome to you both. Nina, if I can start with you. Who do you think needs this more, Putin or Biden? Mark suggested there that Putin turning up on time suggests that he's got more to gain from this time round.
Well, I would agree with Mark, Emily. I think President Biden laid out very clearly that Russia has made itself look foolish on the international stage by engaging in disinformation campaigns, election interference, and cyber warfare. And he laid out that if Russia continues those campaigns, those tactics, then it's Russia that will lose, not the United States, that the United States is prepared to exact some pretty staggering consequences. And I think, given the fact that President Biden had just been with leaders and allies at the G7, at the NATO summit, he knows what Western allies, transatlantic allies are willing to do and act in concert if Russia continues these activities.
And I wonder, Thomas Graham, and you'll know Joe Biden well, did it go the way he would have wanted it? I mean, he couldn't have worked harder to lower expectations, could he?
No, he couldn't have, and I think it went almost exactly the way that he wanted it to and the way he had anticipated. He had an opportunity to meet the man eye to eye, to lay out clearly what American interests were, where the red lines were, and to warn Putin that if he crossed those red lines, there would be consequences. At the same time, he did get agreement to continue or to start talks on strategic stability, which is important for the United States, and also on cyber rules of the road, a very complex and difficult and sensitive issue where dialogue is absolutely necessary at this point.
Nina, I have to admit, I don't understand how you can have rules about cyber warfare. I don't know if there is a kind of, internet equivalent of the Geneva Convention, but it sounds like they've taken these 16 critical infrastructure areas and agreed not to target them. Now, why would you trust somebody who said that when you already think that they've infiltrated your entire democratic system?
Yeah, that is the key question there. And I think personally, my expectations are quite low because in his own press conference, President Putin laid out allegations about the United States cyber warfare and said, actually, Russia is the victim here. So with that framing, I'm not sure that these talks are really going to go in on even footing or on trustworthy footing. And I think President Biden himself set those expectations quite low. He said, we'll see in the next 3 to 6 months how things progress. But you have to start somewhere, and certainly these attacks have had an effect here in the United States, both in our food sources, our movement of gasoline around the East Coast here. So I think it was a pressing issue, but I don't think many people hold out a lot of hope for a deal with a country that routinely rips up international agreements as soon as it signs them.
But hang on, I mean, Putin, Russia thinks that America is the biggest hacker out there. In terms of espionage, they're not wrong, are they?
Well, every nation is engaged in some covert activities in terms of intelligence gathering, but what the United States has not done is disrupt energy lines, water lines, electricity grids, as Russia has done in Ukraine, through criminal gangs. I think that is the difference here. And I don't want to play into President Putin's whataboutist rhetoric because we're talking about apples and oranges. And certainly, President Putin is aware of what the United States has in its cyber arsenal. And if the United States is engaging in that sort of activity, much of it is probably in retaliation for things that Russia has done outside of our norms and standards and cyber warfare.
Thomas, I think we got a good idea at the end of what Putin thought of Trump, or at least we thought we had. What do you think he makes of Joe Biden?
Well, I think he said very clearly that he believes that the president is a man who is a professional, has long experience in this area, that says what he believes and is very straightforward in his conversations. I mean, one of the things that the Russians, and I think President Putin in particular, like about President Biden is that he is predictable. The problem, as we know, with President Trump was that he was totally unpredictable. And no matter what hopes the Russians had invested in Trump and all his rhetoric about warm ties with Russia and wanting to move closer to Russia, The fact of the matter is that relations deteriorated quite significantly under President Trump. With President Biden, you had a tougher opponent, but you have a predictable opponent. You have professionals on the other side. So the Russians believe that they are engaged in a competition, a very serious competition. But I think they appreciate the fact that they're going to be dealing with professionals, people they consider pragmatic. Many of these people they know already, and that gives them some hope that this will be a different type of relationship, not necessarily a more cooperative one, but a different type of relationship from the one they had with President Trump.
But I guess in those 4 years, the world has already changed. Geopolitically, Russia, we know, has long had strategic interest in Afghanistan. Are they looking for a way back in there now? Because I guess Biden's also very conscious of the part that Russia's playing in the Middle East, of the part Russia's playing with China.
I don't think the Russians want a way back into Afghanistan. They got burned in the 1980s. They may want some access to Afghanistan in terms of infrastructure, development, and so forth. But to be back in Afghanistan in the big way is hardly in Russian interest at this point. They've got other fish to fry in the Middle East, in Europe. Afghanistan, in some ways, would be a distraction from all of that.
Nina Yankovic and Thomas Graham, thank you both very much indeed. Thanks for joining us.